we're holding now in the period of time that runs between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah, which is, as far as halacha is concerned anyhow, represented by the weeks of Nechama, as is manifest in the haftarahs that we read. It's known as the Shiva Dנחmatã, and that has halachic ramifications in terms of different haftarahs that get nidcha, that get pushed aside for the sake of reading the haftarahs of Nechama. Mocher Chodesh would get pushed aside. Bahaya Midei Chodesh B'Chodasha gets pushed aside. There's something about a bridge almost that leads from the Tisha B'Av and Churban to Rosh Hashanah, and that bridge is called Nechama. And Nechama itself is a complicated concept. We've addressed it multiple times in different contexts. But the weeks of Nechama are introduced by a day which, strangely enough, doesn't really have any source outside of a very strange appearance that it makes in a Mishnah. And therefore, even the minhagim that we have regarding this day, Tu B'Av, the 15th day of B'Av, is really the subject of a machlekes hapaiskim. Do we say tachnun on this day? Do we not say tachnun on this day? Different opinions. Megillas Tainus was batla, Megillas Tainus was not batla. Tachlis, we're noyeg that we do not say tachnun, and that we do make it a day of call it minor simcha. But this day is the day that opens up the period that is known as Nechama. And like I said, the period that is known as Nechama is not limited just to Nechama. The period that is known as Nechama is meant to be somehow a bridge that leads from Churban to Rosh Hashanah. There is, however, even though, like I said, the only real source that we have for it is this Mishnah in Maseches Tainus. There is, however, a Zohar in Parshas Truma, but the Zohar is darshaning the pasuk Asher tikhu meitam, Zeis haTruma Asher tikhu meitam. This is the truma that you shall take from them. And the Zohar is bothered by the change of the tense, because till then the pasuk has been talking in the singular, Ish Asher yidvenu libay. And now suddenly we go to Asher tikhu meitam in the plural. So the Zohar is bothered. It shouldn't say Asher tikhu meitam. It should say Asher tikach meitay. That you take from him in the singular, because the pasuk before that was speaking in the singular. And therefore the Zohar explains that the pasuk Asher tikhu meitam is not referring to the truma that we take from Klal Yisrael, but rather it's referring to the truma that Klal Yisrael takes from, quote unquote, them. And this is the truma that you, Klal Yisrael, shall take meitam from them. And what is the them? Zahav, v'chesef, u'nechoshes, v'scheles, v'argaman, v'seila ashani. And the Zohar says that each one of those refers to a different Yom Tov. Zahav is Rosh Hashanah, Kesef is Yom Kippur, etc. Teila Shani, says the Zohar, that's a reference to Tu B'Av. And so somehow or another, Tu B'Av gets put into the same category as the other Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach, Shavuos, in that we're supposed to be taking something from it. Asher tikhu meitam, that we're supposed to be taking something from it. And so that means that it's more than just a random reference in a Mishnah in Tainus. There is something about this day specifically, or more accurately, what this day, the period that this day opens, namely the period of Nechama, that we're supposed to be taking from it. There's something that Klal Yisrael is supposed to be taking from it. Asher tikhu me'itam Teila Shani. And why Teila Shani? Says the Zohar, because of this mission and tainus, that the girls would go out wearing begadim shel melas. So, whatever it is that we're referring to, one thing is certain, and that is that Tu B'Av is not meant to merely be a day that passes us by. Again, Tu B'Av is not limited to the day itself, but Tu B'Av is merely the opening for this entire period. It's not meant to be a period that just passes us by, but it's meant to be a period in which something can be taken from. We're supposed to derive something from it. We're supposed to take it and run, so to speak. And what that exactly is referenced by Teila Shani, which, as the Zohar itself makes reference to, back to this Mishnah of the Choles Bakramim, the dances in the Krum. And therefore, we're going to start our discussion of Tu B'Av by looking a little bit at that Mishnah, and then at the Gemara, and seeing what exactly emerges from looking closely at it. The Mishnah is in Tainus on Daf Chav Vav Amud Beis. And the Mishnah says as follows. Omar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo hayu yomim tovim liyisrael kachamisha asar ba'av u'chiyem ha'kippurim. There were no days that were like a Yom Tov to Yisrael greater than the 15th day of Av and on Yom Kippur. Shebahen b'nois Yisrael yotzes b'chlei lavan she'ulim. The daughters of Yerushalayim would go out wearing clothing, borrowed clothing that were white. Shelo levayish es mi she'ein lo. And the reason why they would borrow them is that way everybody was busy borrowing, so no one would be ashamed that they didn't have what to wear. Ubenois Yerushalayim yotzes v'cholos bakramim. They would go out and they would dance in the vineyards. And what would they say? Bachur, young man, lift up your eyes and see, what is it that you're choosing for yourself? Don't look only at beauty. Ten einecha b'mishpacha. Investigate into family. Sheker achein ve'hevel ha'yofi isha yiras Hashem hi tishalo. And that's what they would say. Don't look only at the beauty of the girl, but look also at where she comes from. And that's the Gemara, that's the Mishnah. Now, again, l'chora, the Mishnah is coming to explain what was unique about this day, right? Because the Mishnah opens with Rav Shimon Gamliel saying that there were no Yom Tovim as great as Chamisha Asar B'Av and Yom Kippur. And somehow or another, this story, this description of the dance that took place in the vineyards, somehow or another, this is a description of why this Yom Tov is such a great Yom Tov. Now, it doesn't give us very much information, but nonetheless, this is what happened on this day. The Gemara, however, has a whole different version of this day, an entirely different version. The Gemara says like this. Bishlam Yom Kippurim, that makes sense that Yom Kippur was a great day of holiday, Mishum De'is Beis Slicha Mechila, because it's the day of Slicha. It was the day that the later luchos were given. So it makes sense that it was such a great Yom Tov. Ela Tu B'Av Mayi. But Tu B'Av, what's so special about that day? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, well, Yom Shehutru Shvatim Lovay Zeh B'Zeh. It was the day that the Shvatim darshan the pasuk, and they realized that Moshe Rabbeinu's directive to the daughters of Tzlafcha that they have to marry specifically into their own shevet, was a limited directive. It wasn't the mitzvah l'doros. And so from that day on, even girls who were Yereshes Nachala, even girls who had no brothers and therefore they had inherited the property entirely, were now able to intermarry with any other shevet. Up until that point, they were limited by Moshe Rabbeinu's directive to the daughters of Tzlafcha that they have to intermarry with their own shevet. However, on this day, on Tu B'Av, they darshan a pasuk, and based on the drush of the pasuk, they realized that it was a limited directive, but for l'doros, for all generations, it does not hold, and that the shvatim are permitted to intermarry normally and regularly with each other. And that was a great day of simcha. That's the opinion of Yudah Mar Shmuel. Rav Yosef Amar Rav Nachman, Yom Shehuto Shevet Binyamin Lavoi Bakahal. It was the day in which Klal Yisrael once again allowed Shevet Binyamin to intermarry with the rest of Yisrael, because after the whole story of Pilegesh Begiva, one of the penalties that was imposed upon Shevet Binyamin is that they were forbidden from intermarrying with the rest of the Shvatim. When the Shvatim made the common decision that they are going to once again allow Shevet Binyamin to intermarry with all the other Shvatim, it was on Tu B'Av, hence it became a day of great simcha. That's the opinion of Rav Yosef Amar Rav Nachman. Rabba Bar Bar Chon Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Yom Shekolu B'I Meisei Midbar. It was the day that those who were decreed to die in the Midbar ceased to die. The end of the 40 years, after all of the generation had died, on Tu B'Av they realized that they're not dying any longer, and of course, therefore, was a day of very great simcha. And and as we were told, until all of the generation of the Midbar had died, Moshe Rabbeinu did not converse with Hashem, Shenemar, etc. Ula Omar, Ula says, Yom Shebital Hoshea ben Ola Pardisei Shahishiv Yeravim ben Nevat al Hadrachim. Hoshea ben Ola, who was the king of Yisrael, he pulled back the checkpoints on the road. Yeravim ben Nevat had set up checkpoints to bar anybody entry into New York City, to go to Yerushalayim. And Hoshea ben Ela, when he became king, he removed those checkpoints. And he said, that anybody can go to whatever direction they want to go. Those who wish to go to Yerushalayim are welcome to go to Yerushalayim. Those who want to go worship the Baal are welcome to go worship the Baal. Rav Masna Omar Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beitar L'Kvura. Rav Masna says it was the day that all of those slaughtered in Beitar were finally given burial. And it says Rav Masna, on that day, that permission was granted for burying all of the victims of the slaughter in Beitar, Tiknu b'Yavna ha'toiva ha'meitiv, the Sanhedrin, which at that point was situated in Yavna, that was the day in which they composed the fourth bracha of Birkas HaMazain, the bracha of ha'toiv v'ha'meitiv. And we have to ask ourselves, so what's the Mishnah talking about? If this is what happened on that day, which is why it is such a great day of Yom Tov, then what is the Mishnah talking about? What exactly does the Mishnah have to do with our Gemara? The Mishnah says, this was a very great holiday. On this day, the girls would go out and do the dance thing in the vineyards. The Gemara says, on this day, either this happened, or that happened, or the next thing, or the other thing, or all of them. In Yavna, they established the bracha Teiva Meitiv. What does the Mishnah have to do with our Gemara? Where are they talking different languages? Are they talking about different days? What exactly are they doing? And it's clear that the Gemara is describing what happened. These are the actual events that took place on Tu B'Av. The Mishnah is describing the reaction to those events. there is something about these events that led to the tradition of the dance in the vineyards. Not that the dance in the vineyard is what happened on this day, which makes it a Yom Tov. No, that's what the Gemara is describing. These are the events. The Mishnah is merely telling us, because of all of these events, the tradition that emerged in celebration of all of these events was that the Bnei Yerushalayim would go out and do the dance in the vineyards. Which of course means that now, not only do we have to explain what it was about these events, but we also have to see, okay, whatever the explanation in these events is, how does that lead to that type of an emergent tradition? Right? If these, again, let's follow the steps. The Mishnah is describing something, the Gemara is describing something. The Mishnah and the Gemara seem to be talking different languages. Elamai, it must be that the Gemara is explaining what the events that took place are. This is why it was a Yom Tov. These are the things that took place on this day, which made it into a great day of Simcha, exactly as the Gemara starts off by asking. Bish Lema Yom Kippur, we understand why it was a great Yom Tov. Why is Tu B'Av a great Yom Tov? And then the Gemara gives all of these answers. So clearly, what is it that the Gemara is coming to address? What is it that made this day into a great Yom Tov? Very good. That's the Gemara's purpose. What's the Mishnah doing? The Mishnah is not trying to describe what made it into a Yom Tov. That's what the Gemara is doing. The Mishnah is merely describing, because of this great Yom Tov, here's the tradition that the Bnei Yerushalayim did, and l'chora, the reason why they did it is because it was a tradition that emerged from an appreciation of the events that had happened that made it into a great Yom Tov. That I think is a logical in terms of the steps. Memela, if we want to understand this, we have to figure out what exactly is it that these events are that make it such a great Yom Tov. And secondly, what about these events would have as a reflective tradition the tradition of going out and dancing and saying the things that they say. Those are the things that we need to address in order for us to get a little bit of clarity onto this day. And so in order for us to do this, I want to make a couple of comments about some of the events that are described in the Gemara. Now, it's true that a great deal of the events all seem to revolve around the same concept, the same idea, and that is that different schisms in Klal Yisrael were healed. Certainly, Shehutru Shvatim Lavei Zeh B'Zeh, or that Shevet Binyamin was Hutar, or even what Hoshea ben Elah did. These are all things that did heal to some degree a schism, a rift in Klal Yisrael. And following a Tisha B'Av, which was caused by Sinas Chinam, it definitely seems to be a valid follow-up to being able to take stock of whatever it is that had led to Tisha B'Av. No denying that. But there's much more to it than just that. Much more to it in terms of the other events that are being described. And also much more to it in terms of the reflective tradition that emerged. But I want to make a couple of ha'aras. I have a few comments that I want to share regarding some of these examples, some of the things that we're told are the events that happened on this day. First of all, Kolu Meisei Midbar, that those in the Midbar ceased to die. Rashi brings down a very interesting thing. Rashi brings down that every year on Tisha B'Av, they would go out and they would dig graves, and they would all go to sleep in the graves, and then the next morning, whoever didn't die would get up and come out. And they did this year after year after year. And then in this year, the 40th year, they all woke up and stepped out. And so they were in shock. What, no one died? So they said, oh, you know what? It must be that we made a mistake with the month. We messed up on the month. we got the wrong day for Rosh Chodesh. Today wasn't really Tisha B'Av. So they did it again the next night, expecting that, oh, now things will be back to the norm, that only some of us will step out of the grave alive. But again, the next morning, everybody came out. And they continued to do this until the 15th day of the month, when they could all see that the moon was full. There's no way that it's the 9th day anymore. It's just not possible. And at that point, they realized that clearly the Gzeira had been rescinded, and whoever was still alive was meant to still be alive. That's what Rashi brings down as the explanation for Kol U'Meisei Midbar. Now, understand that, of course, Rashi means this literally. But as far as the literal explanation goes, this is very difficult for two reasons. First of all, there's no such thing as a month that's more than 30 days, which means that even if there was a havamina that they had made a mistake the first night, after the second night, there's no more havamina of a mistake. It's not possible that Tammuz was 31 days. It's just not possible. And therefore, they didn't need to wait to see the moon being full in order to know that today is not Tisha B'Av. Today can't be Tisha B'Av. Because worst case scenario, yesterday wasn't Tisha B'Av, then today will be Tisha B'Av. But you're not going to go past today. We don't have Yom Tov Shlishi Shel Goliyos or Yom Tov Revi Shel Goliyos. We have Yom Tov Sheni Shel Goliyos. Because the worst that could happen is that you're off by one day. And furthermore, okay, let's assume that for whatever reason they were afraid of maybe a mistake in multiple months and they're really off, which is also almost impossible because last month the moon was also full on the 15th day. So it's not like they could have thought that they're off by a few months. It's just not possible. The worst that could be is off by one day. Okay, V'lo Mizogin, let's say, whatever, they were afraid. So I want to ask you, on the 14th day of the month, was the moon clearly past the 9th? On the 14th day of the month, was it clearly past the 9th? Have you guys ever seen the moon on the 14th day? Is it that much different than on the 15th day? So we could assume already on the 13th or even on the 12th, they know for sure that it's not the 9th. Okay, maybe they weren't so good with the moon. It was a cloudy day in the desert. There are always clouds in the desert. Good, but by the time you get to the 14th day, now you know clear that it's not the 9th. And so, although I have no doubt that Rashi's quote of this medrash is for sure meant literally, but there's something here that tells me that it's much more than just a literal cheshbon of how many days have gone by since Tisha B'Av, but that it's much more than that. It's a figurative cheshbon. That is to say that at some point they freed themselves from the Tisha B'Av thing. At a certain point, they were no longer being held in by whatever it is that Tisha B'Av was holding them in, and at that point they realized that Kol U'Meisei Midbar. A certain amount of time has elapsed after Tisha B'Av. We have enough time behind us that allows us now to suddenly move, let's call it, to move beyond Tisha B'Av. That's what I mean when I say that in addition to whatever it means literally, it also means figuratively. But either way, the fact that the Meisei Midbar ceased to die seems to be much more than just the fact that they didn't die. Because listen carefully to what the Gemara says when it says this event. I'm going to read it again. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Yom shekolu by Meisei Midbar. It was the day that the dying of the Midbar, the generation of the Midbar, ceased to die. The Amar Mar, for the master has taught. Now you finish the sentence. What is the master going to teach? Rabba bar bar Chana is saying this is the day that the Midbar's generation, those who were the Gzeira of dying was meted out on, ceased to die. The Omar Mar, for the master has said. What should the Gemara now say? Now the Gemara should quote some quote from a Tana or an Amira that they stopped to die, right? Wouldn't that make sense in the flow of the Gemara? But that's not what the Gemara says. Instead, the Gemara says, the Omar Mar, for the master has said, Ad shaloi kolu meisei midbar, up until the point that the generation was still dying, up until the point that they ceased to die, lo haya dibur im Moshe. Hashem never spoke to Moshe. Shenemar vayihi kasher tomu kol anshe milchamo lamus vayidaber Hashem elai. What? I'm not getting it. Rabbi Bar Bachona says that this is the day that they died. The Omar Mar, for the master has said that this is the day that they stopped to die. No. The Omar Mar, for the master has said, until they all died, Hashem did not converse with Moshe Rabbeinu. You guys ever heard the expression, Ma inyan shmita itzel har Sinai? What's a shaykhis? That's ha'ara number 1 on Kolu Meisei Midbar. My next ha'ara is on the Gemara's last description of the events. Remember, what's the Gemara coming to answer? Why is this such a great Yom Tov? That's how the Gemara opens. B'Shlema Yom Kippur is such a great Yom Tov because it's the day of Slicha and Mechila and the second Luchos. But what about Tu B'Av makes it such a great Yom Tov? And then the Gemara gives all of these explanations. Last explanation. Rabba v'Rav Yosef ta'amri tarvayu. Rabba and Rav Yosef, they say, Yom sheposku milichros eitzim lama'aracha. It was the day in which was decided to start cutting the logs to be used on the fire of the Mizbeach. Because that's when the heat of the sun is at its fullest force, right? The main part of the summer is up until the 15th day of Av. From that point on, already the summer starts to wane, but the summer has waxed up to that point. So the wood is really dry as going to get. And therefore, on this day, that was the day that the decision was made. From this day on, we start chopping the logs in order to set it up on the Mizbeach. Need I say any more? Again, the Gemara is asking, what about this day is such an incredible day that it's mamish equated with Yom Kippur? It's like there were no Yomim Tovim like these days, Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. And why Tu B'Av? I'll tell you why. Because Lamaisa, that's when they would take their axes to go out to chop wood. Sam, you could probably relate to that, right? You know, go out to the backyard, chop wood, right? But we can't relate to that. What is the Gemara talking about? Well, what is that supposed to mean? And therefore it's a Yom Tov? And not just Stam a Yom Tov. No. You thought Pesach was important. No Yom Tovim like Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. You know, chopping wood. Oh, now that's an important thing. What is the Gemara talking about? That's my second ha'ara on this Gemara. My third ha'ara is slightly more touchy, and people are going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But you know how it is. One of the explanations given is because it was the day that the slaughtered in Beitar were given leave to be buried. Okay, that's taka, very great Yom Tov, I agree. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed, and they're piled up. Their corpses are laying there piled up for who knows how many years, being used as fences for vineyards. Sounds almost Germanic. And finally, they were given permission by the government to bury all of these bodies. Taka. It's something that, as Jews, we can relate to. So in Yavne, where the Sanhedrin was situated, they established a new bracha and birkas hamazon. Hatoi v'hameitiv. Hashem is so good and continues to do good. Now, I'm not in any which way minimizing the incredible Toiv and the incredible Meitiv that the Beirei bestowed upon Klal Yisrael, in that these bodies did not decompose and that they were given leave to be buried. I'm not minimizing. But when you think about the way that the Gemara in Gittin describes the slaughter in Beitar, you realize that the community in Beitar numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It was obviously an unbelievable, extraordinary congregation of Jews. Fabulous in number, fabulous in affluence, fabulous in clout. It was an unbelievable, extraordinary state in which those Jews were. So understand, them getting buried deserves Hatoiv HaMeitiv, but the fact that they had a city like Beitar doesn't deserve Hatoiv HaMeitiv? Imagine somebody comes today to Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh and they look around and they see what's going on. They say, wow. Okay, assuming that they didn't get caught in traffic. They would say, wow, Hatoiv HaMeitiv. Say, no, you fool. Let's go to the cemetery, and there you could say Hatoiv HaMeitiv. Again, I'm not minimizing the incredible Toiv and the incredible Hatova that there was. But for that, you establish a bracha? Well, why do you have to wait for that to make a bracha? Why don't you make a bracha way before they're slaughtered? Make a bracha on the fact that Klal Yisrael had a city like that to start with. When Chachamim had seen that city, why didn't they immediately establish Hatoiv HaMeitiv? Look at this, hundreds of thousands of Jews everywhere. Unbelievable, extraordinary. Why didn't they make a bracha Hatoiv HaMeitiv on that? Why making a Hatoiv HaMeitiv on the fact that the corpses didn't decompose and they are now allowed to be buried? Again, I'm not minimizing that that's indeed a tremendous hatava, but come on, let's put things in perspective over here. They got Hatoiv HaMeitiv on the good that happens to Klal. So when things are still good, why? So I know you guys are all thinking, yeah, but we're Jews, we love to celebrate horror. So in Mela, we make Hatoiv HaMeitiv on the horror. Yeah, I know, that's what everybody's thinking. Right, I know, Nassim. I know before I ask the question. But you hear what I'm saying? It's very, very difficult. Well, that's what you make Hatoiv HaMeitiv on. It's very hard to accept. That's my third ha'orah on the examples given in the Gemara. And I think that all three of these ha'orahs are valid ha'orahs. But the key to understanding what exactly the Gemara is describing is the reflective tradition. Now, the reflective tradition is that these girls would go out into the vineyard, and they would say, Bachur sana einecho re'ei ma'ata boire. See what it is that you have to choose. Al titein encha b'noi, ten encha b'mishpacha. Don't look only at the beauty, look also at the family, and based on those types of things, choose. The Gemara, also in Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, expands a little bit on what it is that they would say. And the Gemara says like this. Miyuchosei shebehen, those of those girls, the girls who came from families of great yichus, they were the ones who would say, don't look so much at the beauty, look instead at the family, at the yichus. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braisa, here's how it really went down. Yefeifiyei shebehen mahayu oimreis, those of them who were taka beautiful, what would they say? They would say, Tenuei nechem liyofi. Obviously. They would say, look, see beauty. She'ein ha'isha ela liyofi. Miyuchasei shebehen mahayu oimreis, those who happen to have had the attribute of yichus, what would they say? You're never going to believe it. Yeah, I'll share it with you. You're not going to believe it, but I'll share it with you. Tenuei nechem ha'mishpacha. It was a coincidence. I promise you, it was just a coincidence. The ones who were beautiful, they were the ones who said, take for beauty, and the ones who had good yichus, they were the ones who said, take for beauty, take for yichus instead of beauty. You know what they say, the ones who have good midos, they say, take for the good midos. And the ones who have beauty, they say, take for the beauty. But it's only coincidental. Okay, Nebuch, what about the ones who Taka didn't have anything? They were ugly, and they also didn't come from good families, probably. What did they say? They said, Chu mikchem l'shem shamayim. Take l'shem shamayim. Ubilvad she'tatrunu b'zehuvim. Contingent, of course, that you dress us up with lots and lots of gold. We're not pretty. We're telling you, take us l'shem shamayim. But you know, there's a thing called plastic surgery. So you can use it. That's the Braisa's description. Okay, that's a little bit different, I would say, than the way the Mishnah put it, right? The Mishnah seemed to be a little bit benign. The Mishnah was like, listen, the Mishnah was very frum. Don't look at beauty, look at mishpacha, that's it. That's the way Rebbe wrote the Mishnah. The Braisa lets us into the secret back end, and the Braisa says, well, you know, it wasn't as frum as it sounds. The beautiful ones, Taka talked about beauty. The miyuchasos talked about yichus, and the ugly ones talked about money. Great. Classic. This is great stuff. Now, that's the Gemara regarding the girls' dance. Unbeknown to most, there's a corresponding Gemara which talks about the men's dance. The Gemara in Ksuvah says as follows: Keitzad mirakdim lifnei hakala. What is it that we say when we, the men, are dancing before the kala? So Beis Shammai say, Kala kamoshi. You say the way she is, which I guess translates into if she's beautiful, you say she's beautiful. If she comes from good yichus, you say that she has good yichus. And if she's ugly, you say give her a lot of money. They still say no, kala no v'chasuda. No matter what, all kalas are the same. They're all beautiful, they're all special, they're all wonderful. Sebe Shammai to Beis Hillel, the Torah says bidvar sheker tirchak. What happens if she's not beautiful? Say Beis Hillel back to Beis Shammai, listen, a person has to be me'urav im abriyos. That's the Gemara in Ksuvas. The Braisa, however, in Maseches Kala, quotes this exact Gemara, but gives a little bit more information. And listen to what the Braisa Maseches Kala says. This is Perik Yod Halacha Aleph. Braisa. Keitzad maraktim lifnei hakala. Beis Shammai yoimrim kala kamoshi. Beis Hillel yoimrim kala no v'chasuda. Amar lehem Beis Shammai afilu hichi geres oisuma. What about if she's ugly? Haksiv midvar sheker tirchak. Amar lehem Beis Hillel, no. That's the Braisa quoted exactly as it is quoted in the Gemara in Ksuvas. But the Gemara over here says like this: Ubeis Hillel nami leika hachanor. Good. So Beis Hillel gave their answer to Beis Shammai, but Lamaisa, she's not beautiful if she isn't. So why are you saying that she's beautiful? Answers the Gemara. Listen, beauty isn't only in physical beauty. Dilma no'eh b'ma'aseha. Maybe no'eh means in her behavior. No'eh mi botei oves. Beauty in terms of the family that she comes from. That's Beis Hillel's explanation. So it's not a real lie. Because who's to say that when you said kala no v'chasuda, you meant no'eh physically, maybe you meant no'eh in other ways. Which means that according to Beis Hillel, here's what you're doing. If she's beautiful, you're saying no, because she's beautiful. If she comes from a good family, you're saying no, because she comes from a good family. And if she's ugly, you're saying no, because she has good midas. So you see that these are exactly the same things that the girls are saying. There it's the girls who are saying, look at this and choose based on that. And here the Gemara is saying that we recognize that this is what they had and that based on that the choice was made. Right? So these are two pieces that create a single whole. These two Gemaras, the Mishnah and Tainis, and the Bryce over here in the Maseches Kala, they're really describing the same thing just from two different parts. One is what the girls are saying in order to get right the men to make the choice, and over here we're describing the choice that was made. Right, so it's two parts of a single whole. In both of them, we're focusing either on actual beauty or on mishpacha or on whatever it is that we're focusing. Now, why do I say this is the key? Because the operative point that these two dances were making was a highlight on the reason for choices. Both in terms of what the girls are saying in their dance and in terms of what it is that we're saying in our dance, both of them, the intent is to highlight the choice that will be made or the choice that was made. But either way, the point is to highlight what it was that allowed us to make the choice that was ultimately made. That's for sure what this dance and the song is all about, right? That's what it's clearly coming to highlight. When Noach comes out of the Teva, the Torah says as follows: that Noach looked onto the land and he saw that the land had dried out. And what's the word that the Torah uses for drying out? Listen carefully to the way the Chumash puts it. Vayihi ba'achas v'sheish me'ei shana barishayin be'echad lachodesh chorvu hamayim me'al ha'aretz. The waters dried out from the land. Vayosar Noach es michseh ha'teva. Noach removed the covering of the teva. Vayar, and he observed v'hinei chorvu pnei ha'adama, that the surface of the earth had dried out. What word does the Torah use to describe the drying out of the world? The Torah uses the word chorav. Chorvu hamayim me'al ha'oretz, and then again, chorvu pnei ha'adama. Now it's true that the Torah does not want to use the word yavesh because there's a difference between chorev and yavesh, as Rashi points out. Because the next pasuk says, "Ubachodesh hasheni b'shiv'a ve'esrim yom hachodesh yavsha ha'aretz." So there's definitely a difference between chorva and yavsha. Yavsha is dry as we know it, and chorva is more muddy, sticky. That's how Rashi learns the word chorav. Says Rashi, "Na'aseh kemin tit," that it was made like a form of mold, like a form of mud, clay-like. But nonetheless, the word that the Torah uses for this state is chorav. Now, chorav is exactly the same word that we use to describe that which is totally destroyed. So we have to ask ourselves, isn't that a strange way to describe the way that Noach sees this world? If the pasuk was describing that Noach opened up the teva and he saw that the world was destroyed, that would be perfectly sensible to use this word, Charvu pnei ha'adamah, that the entire surface of the world had been eradicated and destroyed. But that's not what the Torah is describing. The Torah is describing how, as Rashi puts it, shekarmu paneha shamala, that there was like a sheen of this clay-like material that covered the surface of the earth. And the Targum translates the word neguvu, to be dried out. And so we have to ask ourselves, what exactly is it about what Noach is observing when he opens up the teva that allows us to use the same term that we use for when something is totally destroyed? And I think the answer is, and I'm going to use an analogy because it's something that we need to envision in our minds in order to appreciate. When you go into a deep tunnel, imagine you're going on a very, very long tunnel. The tunnel keeps going on and on and on. When you come out of the tunnel, what sensation do you feel? So most of us haven't been in tunnels of those lengths, but imagine you're in a 5-mile tunnel. You go into the tunnel and you're in 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 the tunnel, and then suddenly you come out of the tunnel. What sense? What is your sensation when you come out of that tunnel? You feel like you've come back into the world. Right? You feel like you're coming out of the tunnel, and you're back into the world where there's light, and there's birds chirping, and the sun is shining type thing. You feel you've gone from one world into another world in a positive way. What Noach is realizing when he opens up the teva, what he's sensing is exactly that same sensation. Coming out of this tunnel, right, which the teva was to a great degree, and now you're out of the tunnel. And suddenly you're back in the world. All churban leads to that sensation when you come out of it on the other end. When you go through the tunnel of churban and come out on the other end, what you sense is that you're back in a world. It's a new world, but it's a different world, but you're back in a world. Even metaphorically, we refer to this in that way, where a person is in a deep darkness and then comes out into the light. There's a certain sense of being released from the depths of churban, and how suddenly having again the possibility to breathe normally, to step into this world and to be part of this world as opposed to the deep depths of darkness that you were in. When Noach opens up the teva and he sees this new world in front of him, he realizes that he's back on the world. There's a new world here. He stepped out of churban and into this new world. And so indeed, the dryness that he has seen is the churban. It's just the other end of the churban. Does everybody see what I'm saying with the analogy of a tunnel? Does everybody appreciate visually what it is that I'm describing in terms of this analogy, this metaphor, I should say, of a tunnel? Memela, the word that the Torah uses for what Noach is sensing is the same word as churban, because it is a result of the fact that there is churban and he's now come out on the other end of the churban that he's appreciating. Does it mean dried? Yes, of course it means dry, but it's not the dryness that Noach was appreciating. It was the new world that Noach was appreciating. Because the other end of Churban is the new world, which is, of course, what Nechama is. A reconstructed world. It's a new world. It's not the same world that you had. It's a new world. You've come out of the other end of this deep tunnel called Churban, and now you're at the other end of it, and you're suddenly back in a new world. And so if we could summarize it into a single sentence, we could say, Churban is the only thing that leads to an Olam Chadash, a new world. Because Churban does exactly that. It destroys, it eradicates, it breaks down whatever the order of the old world was. And yes, it usually is pretty horrible, but when you get out from the other end of this tunnel, suddenly you have a new world. Now, what do you do when you have a new world? What should one do when he has a new world? So we always tend to say, oh, the only way for us to be able to fully deal with Churban is that Klal Yisrael has to change. Meanwhile, each and every individual is trying to live his life exactly as it was before. But the Klal Yisrael has to change. The thems have to change. Me, obviously, I'm going to continue living my own life exactly the way I was. I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that my life goes on exactly as it always did. But Klal Yisrael, the nation, globally has to change. The point of Churban is no. Klal Yisrael doesn't have to change. Klal Yisrael doesn't have to make choices. Klal Yisrael doesn't have to deal with this new world. You have to deal with this new world. Don't try to create a situation which you're really just, I'm going to be exactly the same as it was. I'm going to still maintain the original order that my life always ran according to, and let the world around me deal with the new world order. The point of getting through the tunnel to the other end is, so that means that there's no of the old world order. That means that now I have to suddenly make order based on the new world that I am in. It's not a global new world. It is an individual new world for each and every individual. It is meant to be a new world, and every individual has to make for himself a new world. So that the light at the other end of the tunnel, the emerging from the tunnel, is the ability to be borer, to be able to be borer in this Olam Chadash, what it is that you're going to do. What order are you going to create for yourself in this Olam Chadash? Not how are you going to manage to create this little bubble in which your world order remains exactly the same and leave it to the global world order to deal with it. No. Each and every individual who goes through the tunnel of Churban and comes out alive at the other end, each one has to be borer for himself, his own world order. He has to reconstruct a world in which he lives in. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Memela, says the Gemara, the events of Tu B'Av, it wasn't the fact that the people in the Midbar stopped to die. That wasn't it. The Omar Mar, because as the Master said, until they stopped to die, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't having the dibur with the Beirut. The simcha isn't because they stopped to die. The simcha is because Hashem was talking to Moshe Rabbeinu again. It was a new world. They were in a tunnel for 40 years where there was no dibur between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. They come out of this tunnel and now there's a dibur again. That's the simcha. Not the fact that people stopped to die. Says the Gemara, it was the day that the Meisei Midbar stopped to die. The Omar Mar, that until they stopped to die, there was no dibur. The simcha is based on the fact that down there's a dibur, not that they stopped to die. You know why it was such a great day, the day that they took their axes to chop the wood? Nothing to do with the chopping of the wood. But because of what the Gemara goes on to say, says the Gemara, Tanya Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol Omer, Mechamisha Asar Ba'av Ve'elach, from the 15th day in Av and onwards, Toshash Koicha Shulchama, that's when the sun starts to wane. Mikan Ve'elach, from this moment on, the nights start to get longer and the days shorter, and therefore Demosif, he who adds to his schedule and takes advantage of the longer nights, because remember, in those days you worked by day and learnt by night. And so in the new world that comes after the 15th day of Av, when the nights get longer, that means now there is more time for a person to spend involved in Torah. Says the Gemara, D'maisif Yosif. Someone who takes advantage of this new world and adds to his schedule of learning, Yosef shall have prolonged days. Udelomos, but someone who ignores it and just stays in exactly the world order that he was always in and ignores what's going on and that there's a new world out there in which suddenly the days are shorter and the nights are longer, Yosef, he'll lose life. This simcha isn't from the fact that they would chop wood. This simcha was from the fact that the nights got longer. And what happens if the nights get longer? Oh, longer nights. That's a whole different world. That's a world where suddenly what used to be the ikr becomes the tafel, and what used to be the tafel now becomes the ikr. When the days are long, the ikr is the malacha that you're doing. And the tafel is the short nights. You don't have so much time. When the nights are long, it's the exact opposite. That which was tafel until now suddenly becomes the ikr. And that which was ikr till now suddenly becomes the tafel. It's a new world. So either you grasp this new world and you are boirer what you're going to do with it, or you just lost everything. The maisif, yosef. The lo maisif, yosef. So it's not the chopping of the wood any more than it's the dying of the midbar. It's not the dying of the midbar, it's the dibur of Moshe that creates this Yom Tov. It's not the chopping of the wood. It's the new world that you can now grab with your two hands and do something with. That's the cause for the great simcha. Memela, the reflective tradition was one in which that every single human being is given the choice. And they would go out there into the vineyards and they would say, Bachur sana einecha uberar lecha urei ma'ata boire. This is a new world. You're getting married. It's a new world for you. What are you going to do with this world? You have to lift up your eyes and be borer. You have to make this new world something that you're grabbing with two hands and are being borer based on things. And so this became the reflective tradition of all that Tu B'Av stood for. Tu B'Av stands for Churban leads to an Olam Chodesh. Olam Chodesh demands being borer. Not global borer, individual borer. Memela, the emergent, the reflective tradition was Bachur, Sonai Necha Urei Ma'ata Boirer. This is your world. What are you going to do with this world? This is your life. What are you going to do with this life? This is your marriage. What are you going to do with this marriage? How are you going to choose in this marriage? What type of world are you going to have in this Olam Chodesh that you now have the opportunity to create? That's the point of Tu B'Av. Is it any shock, therefore, that the climax of this period of time would be Rosh Hashanah? Or is it just the most obvious follow-up? Hayom horas olam. It's the same exact concept. Memela, it is true that Tu B'Av, which opens the period of Nechama, which is the moment where we come out of the tunnel on the other end and we enter into an Olam Chodesh, is indeed the bridge that leads from Churban to the Yom Adin, to Rosh Hashanah, to Shikul, all of those things. They're all, it's a bridge, literally. Just takes you from one place to another. And how? What's the mechanism of the bridge? Sana einecha ure'ei ma'ata boire. It's a new world. Be borer. That is the greatest simcha for any human being. And Memela says the Mishnah that lo hayam tarim Yisrael kechamisha asar ba'av u'chiyem ha'kippurim. Okay, I know we ran a little bit late. I apologize. It was a real pleasure sharing all of this time with you. I think already by next Sunday, this man is going to be... No, we have one more week. Okay, we have one more week.
Can I ask something?
Who's talking?
Yonatan.
Klecky, yes.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss something. Did Rebbe answer why the Sanhedrin and they only said the bracha after they were allowed to be buried and not on the city itself?
No, I didn't. Thank you. But it's clear that if Churban is what leads to an Olam Chadash, and the Olam Chadash is the world in which I have the ability to be buried, that it makes sense that I would be making a bracha Teiva Meitiv not on the binyan, but on the Churban. Okay.
Hey, I just one quick thing.
You can call me.
Okay, fine, but Rebbe has to answer this time.
If I'm able to. Don't call me now, though. All right, I'll see you all next Sunday.
Thank you.
See you, Rebbe.
Bye, guys.
Go away.
Bye.
See you, Rebbe.
Bye.